Coming this fall from SJS Direct, E-Steam The Sands of Time. It's action, adventure, and romance in ancient Egypt in this fantasy flashback E-Steam series adventure. Pre-order E-Steam The Sands of Time today on Amazon.com. According to The Hollywood Reporter and numerous Hollywood sources, actor Henry Cavill will no longer be playing the role of Superman. And the reason for Henry Cavill no longer playing the role of Superman is the fact that your actor Henry Cavill couldn't make a cameo appearance in Warner Brothers' upcoming Shazam film, and he couldn't do it because he had numerous other commitments, including the Netflix series The Witcher, where he was cast in a lead role. Now, many are bemoaning actor Henry Cavill no longer playing Superman, but I see this as a great blessing for Henry Cavill. And the reason why I see it as a great blessing for Henry Cavill is because he will no longer be associated with the absolutely horrific portrayal of Superman in Man of Steel, the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and the absolutely horrific Justice League. Because I can't blame Henry Cavill for what happened in those films. It wasn't his fault. He was just an actor hired to do a job, and the people responsible for all of the dysfunction as related to adaptations of DC properties are people like Zack Snyder and many of these Warner Brothers executives who just can't seem to realize that it's not 1989 anymore. And the big problem with many of these DC adaptations isn't actors like your Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot. No, the problem has always been these Warner Brothers executives, because these Warner Brothers executives just can't get out of the past. Now, when it came down to superhero properties back in the mid 1980s, you had Warner Brothers executives who had this dark vision, which was helmed by directors like Tim Burton for the first Batman movie, which came out in 1989. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers just can't get out of the late 1980s and 1990s in terms of cinematic models. And this is why they have stumbled over the last decade or so, because they still want to make films that feature this dark, dreary, deconstructionist model that is akin to Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. But the world has changed, and we saw that world change with the introduction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And people want to see bright, hopeful characters. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers executives just can't get out of the time warp of 1989 to give us those fun, bright, optimistic, and hopeful characters of the DC Universe. And what's really sad is that the DC Universe would probably do incredibly well if people gave us films which featured those bright, optimistic, fun, and hopeful characters that have always been a part of the DC Universe. Because while Batman's part of the DC Universe is a dark and dreary place, the world of Superman and Wonder Woman is bright and hopeful. And that's what people want to see in DC superhero films. They want to see optimism, they want to see hope, and they want to see fun, but they don't get that because Warner Brothers executives are so caught up in staying with an archaic cinematic model that they can't think to adapt to give us a new model for storytelling. And the big problem with Warner Brothers is that, again, they just don't want to change. So I look at Henry Cavill as getting out of a bad situation and looking like he's going to go on to have a promising career. He recently had a hit with Mission Impossible Fallout, and with the Witcher lead role, while the show has its own technical issues, you can't really blame Henry Cavill for many of the issues there. And with many people saying that he should be the next James Bond, and I believe he should be the next James Bond, it looks like Henry Cavill is going to be on his way to having a promising career, and he's going to be able to put Superman behind him. And as I see it, him getting away from this role is the best thing to ever happen to him, because now he won't be associated with this absolutely dreadful franchise. And we can see who the real enemy is, because the real enemy over the last 25, 30 years has always been these Warner Brothers executives who go out of their way to hire people like Zack Snyder, who have this dreary, dark, and depressing vision that people are tired of seeing. When it comes down to the generations of Gen Y and Millennials and Generation Z, they want fun characters. They want bright characters. They want hopeful characters. They want a DC cinematic universe that is the equivalent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers just can't get its head out of the sand and see the world that they're building isn't what the customer wants. And the customer has been telling these DC and Warner Brothers executives what they want, but they just refuse to listen to them and give them what they want. Now, it looks like with Shazam, we might have a fun movie, but and Aquaman, we might have another look at that hopefulness. But that's not. But the big problem again is that we have these Warner Brothers executives who just are the problem, and because they are the problem, this is why we didn't get the horse race between the MCU and DCU that we should have gotten. Because had we gotten a bright, hopeful group of DC superheroes, I believe we could have had a really serious and competitive horse race between Marvel and DC on screen, and we could have been watching some great cinematic adaptations of both universes that captured the spirit of both of them. But what's really, really sad about this Henry Cavill departure is that Warner Brothers spent hundreds of millions of dollars, but people never got to see him actually play the real Superman, the way Christopher Reeve got to play the real Superman back in the 1970s. Now, when you think of Superman, you always think of Christopher Reeve, because when Christopher Reeve played Superman, he was true to the spirit of who Superman was. A bright, hopeful, optimistic man who was a friend to everyone and wanted to help those all around him. That's what Superman is. He embodies the American spirit, the American way, and the whole idea that anybody, even a Kryptonian from another planet, can go out and achieve the American dream. And we didn't get to see any sort of American dream in Man of Steel. No, all we got to see was an angry man going out here and just literally demolishing everything in his path, when Clark would never act like that. Clark has always been about protecting people, preserving human life, and making sure to minimize damage. And that was not a part of Man of Steel. And again, Warner Brothers did a disservice to Henry Cavill in not allowing him to play Superman. And what's even more sad about it is that your Tyler Hoechlin got a chance to play the real Superman in the Supergirl TV show, but your Henry Cavill never got that opportunity to play that same great character on numerous screens all across this country. And I believe if we put the real Superman on screens, I believe he would be just as big a box office hit as Spider-Man, because what people are looking for in their superheroes is an escape, and they're looking for a hopeful character that will inspire them to do better. And that's what the Metropolis Marvel, Earth's greatest hero in the DC universe, does. He inspires people not only on Earth, but he inspires people all across from galaxies, and he inspired people for centuries, to the point where the Legion of Superheroes were so inspired by his model that they literally created their whole mission based on Superman. So I look at this whole DC cinematic universe and I see the problem. And again, the problem is not an actor like Henry Cavill, because an actor with a great director like the Richard Donner, who had the great vision for Superman with verisimilitude, he can go out here and make 1.5 or 1 3/4 of a great Superman film, and we could get a great story featuring Superman from a guy like Richard Donner. And all they need is a guy with that type of vision. But again, these Warner Brothers executives are the problem, because these Warner Brothers executives are still trying to get the success of Batman 1989 in 2018, not understanding that the world of 1989 was a dark, dreary, and depressing place, plagued by crack epidemics, plagued by AIDS, plagued by homelessness, plagued by crime. So that Batman model, yes, that was nice for 1989 because it was a commentary on 1989. But in 2018, we have a completely different world out here, a completely different society out here. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe pays commentary to that world in its films, and we wanted to see something that reflected that in DC's films. But DC, again, because they had so many people who have this dark vision, they don't want to give us that. But they're the big problem with everything, with the least common denominator with all of these failed properties is Warner Brothers. And unless we get some changes in management as related to Warner Brothers, it doesn't matter if we get Henry Cavill or Academy Award winning actors or even a guy like Michael B. Jordan in the role of Superman, we're not going to have any success. And with this whole rumor talking about considering Michael B. Jordan, that just shows you how lost these Warner Brothers executives are. Because Michael B. Jordan was a part of the failed Fantastic Four, so putting him in the role of Superman is like the definition of insanity. You're doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. Michael B. Jordan will never be Superman because Superman is not black. Superman is a white, all-American, and there is no changing that. This is another mistake that your Warner Brothers is considering making, and again, it shows where the real problem is. And again, unless Warner Brothers executives have a complete change in management and a complete change in direction, they're going to continue to make flop after flop after flop until the studio falls into bankruptcy. Because I look at this decision to consider Michael B. Jordan, I look at that awful Titans trailer, and I look at many of their shows like Supergirl, Arrow, The Flash, and again, I see where the problem lies. And again, until there is a change at the top, we're not going to see great films featuring DC characters at theaters all across this country. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct titles like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the Temptation of John Haynes, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.